Hello, this is Steve Wickham, and welcome to the sixth conversation we've had on living in light of man's chief end. And this conversation is going to be on health and wealth. Fascinating conversation I think we should have. If you remember, if you've been following us all along, we are in the sixth conversation, the sixth week of our total plan of addressing this issue. And it's on health and wealth, and it's all part of my chief end and my choices. If you remember, the whole thing that we've been really gluing everything to is man's chief end of glorifying God and enjoying Him forever. That is coming from the Westminster Confession of Faith, where the Westminster Divines said that the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. So that's really where we're heading in our conversation. So how does that inform our lives on a daily basis? We happen to believe that if we are to live our life towards our chief end, that our goal of makarios, our happy or blessed or flourishing life, would be best fulfilled if we are in keeping with the way God has designed us, and that the end that He has created for us would be realized. Our best happiness comes at that point where we are in the center of our chief end, and everything works towards it. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. If you talk to most people in the American culture, they would probably say that our conversation today will be the items that probably give us the most happiness in life, and that is health and wealth. If you go to any store, bookstore, or if you watch any television about anything that has to do with self-help, most of the self-help books focus on becoming healthier and also becoming wealthier, and the derivations of all of that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, how we should, as Christians, understand health and wealth, and putting it all in perspective according to our chief end. There's no doubt that if you look into the American culture, that there's a huge emphasis on the pursuit of health, especially lately. And they got everything from CrossFit to all kinds of extreme sports to the healthcare craze is amazing all around us. And the big question is how much of that is good for us and how much may be a diversion from our chief end. And that's the question that we're going to try to look at today. When it comes to health, we don't find a whole lot in the Bible that tells us about how to think about and feel about these things, except for one verse in particular, and that's 1 Timothy 4:8 that says, "Physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come." And so you look at this verse, and it gives you the concept of the fact that, yes, we should be healthy, we should be training, we should be physically fit, but it is definitely not as high of a virtue in the Christian life as other things, especially the pursuit of godliness. And so with that in mind, it should put us into at least into some kind of a mental construct to think about how it would fit in with all the other values in our lives, especially as it pertains to our chief end. The big question that we need to ask ourselves is, why do we join health clubs? And if you look around the country, we are pretty obsessed with health, especially many of us who are young in life. Even some older people just are doing everything they can to become fit and strong, and they spend a lot of money on this. I'm no exception. And the big question that we have is that, why? Why do we do these things? Is it just to become healthier? One thing we've noticed through the research of why people join clubs is that usually they tell us that their initial response when we ask them this question is that they want to become fit, they want to be healthier as people. But as we probe into the real true motivations and the deeper underlying motivations, we find that most people actually join health clubs not so much for the fitness of things, but really to become more attractive. And that's really important for us to understand, is the motivations that we truly have. We have a way of justifying our pursuit of health as being the major motivator, but most of us are actually more concerned about how our bodies and look and how we are perceived by other people. And so a healthier body obviously is much more attractive to others than a non-healthy body. So this is really interesting for us to understand, especially as Christians, so that we know what's happening. And so in this vein, this does not make, pursuit of healthy even joining health clubs problematic for us as Christians, but it's just important for us to understand our motivations so we don't lose sight. Because there are many people who spend so much time pursuing health that they neglect other things in their lives, and this can be very, very, troubling, and also can really limit our ability to really truly enjoy God and also glorify Him in this world. And so it's important that we address those issues, because as you look at the health craze, I think you would find it very easy to roll it down into some very simple ideas about why it is important to us. And it's much more than just actually having a healthy life. It's not about beauty or handsomeness if you're a man, to ultimately to attractiveness, that we feel like we are attractive to other people, whether it's for romantic reasons or just to be accepted into a community. And some of us like the notion or the label of being a healthy person, and we treat that really as badge value. And the big question that we have to ask ourselves is, why health? And why is health such a big importance to us? And it's really kind of interesting to know that many of us who are very heavily influenced by health are actually like exercise and diet and those kinds of things. We find out that we're probably pursuing it to a level of excess, because it's taking away time from more important things and limiting our abilities to interact with others. And that can be a critical problem for us if we are really truly to glorify God in this world. We know that health really is one of those negative things in life. It's appreciated when you have it, but when you don't have it, it becomes a very big problem. So it's more the lack of health that becomes an issue for us. Many of us who are pursuing healthy lifestyles, before the modern era, before the Industrial Revolution, many people actually just were trying to remain healthy so they could be productive, because there's so much manual labor out there. A lot of us who are actually pursuing health today are actually trying we're pushing our bodies to the point where really it's not necessary for us to be able to be productive in life. So we have to understand exactly what's driving us and why we are spending so much time and fortune on becoming healthy. And I think we would probably find it very easy for all of us that we're really trying to get beyond just a healthy life, but into more of an attractive life. And so that's a critical notion for us, because it'll help us make some decisions about what's most important in our lives as we move along. But when health is gone, it's problematic for us. When health fails, becomes difficult. First of all, it puts limits on us. We can't do as much as we used to if we are in a failing health situation. Sometimes it completely debilitates us. Also, it strains our resources, our time and our money. Time in the sense that I just have very little energy in being able to put myself out there in front and help people and be involved in other people's lives. And money is that, staying healthy and trying to return to health can be a very expensive proposition in American culture today. Also, it creates dependency where we have to rely upon others in order for us to be able to take care of the very normal things of life. And that can be really a straining issue in our lives. And another thing to consider is that it becomes very difficult for us to focus on others. We become very much focused on us and our situations when health starts to run away from us. And so those things are actually limiting to us to be able to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And we have to be aware of that. So health is something that is that's more a problem when it's missing than it is when it's present. And so that's something for us to remember as we think about health. Another thing we have to ask ourselves is, are we morally obligated to live a healthy life? And, our lives are our own. We know that. We are also going to be held accountable for those lives. And but do we really have a moral obligation to be healthy? I mean, it's my life. If I want to die early, and if I want to eat ice cream every meal and eat bloody steaks and lots of baked potato and sour cream and butter on each one at every meal, is that my prerogative? Is just being a free person, or do I need to actually be healthy for other reasons? One thing we have to really consider is that we do have an effect on others by our health, whether it's our immediate family and people who are near us who actually have to care for us when we're unhealthy, but also as we get involved in healthcare, whether we are being insured or whether we're on some kind of government program, our unhealthiness affects others. It drives up costs, and that is a problem. So that if I'm unhealthy, then I'm actually causing trouble for other people, which we know is something that is not in keeping with our chief end. We're there to serve and help people, not make it more difficult for people. So the moral obligation is we should be healthy. We owe it to others to make sure we live a life that does not create more stress on them. And from now on and into the future, as far as we can tell, a communal form of cost sharing of healthcare is going to be a part of our lives no matter what, whether it is a government program or whether it is an insurance pool. The things that we do with our health will actually have ripple effects into other people's lives. So that I think there's a really strong moral obligation we have to live a healthy life. And while I was talking with a doctor not too long ago, he just mentioned to me that if we could just really knock down three major problems in American health, we could save all of ourselves a lot of money. Our healthcare system is overburdened because of smoking, obesity, and diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes. And those things can be actually regulated by just healthy lifestyles. And if we can knock those out, then that would be a major improvement to the stress on our health systems. Which is something I think that we ought to take into consideration as believers as we look to be salt and light in the world. The question we must ask ourselves is, when is the pursuit of health in conflict with our chief end? Well, it is when we actually become obsessed by it and it becomes a limiting factor in my ability to work and interact with others. If I use it as a way of pride, even if I don't have health, and actually look at other people with condescension who spend so much time in health, anything that tears relationships apart is going to be in conflict with our chief end. And so if health is that I'm spending many hours every day in the gym or on the golf course or playing sports, or if my diet keeps me from being able to enjoy other people and interact and have meals with them because my diet's so restricted that it becomes impossible for me to be able to have social gathering time with other people, those things are actually in conflict with our chief end. And when it's in the support of our chief end is when it takes all the noise out of our lives and that we are healthy, we're not actually being a burden on other people when it can be avoided, and that we have the ability to function properly. And so our health does become a necessary thing. So I hope that helps a little bit just to understand about health, because it is a big issue in our culture. Even though the Bible speaks very little about it, there's some underlying principles that we must consider as we consider health in the light of our chief end. So let's look at the pursuit of wealth next. Well, this is the American dream, isn't it? Where you actually go seek out and be able to fulfill your wildest dreams and become wealthy and be able to do all kinds of magnificent and things with your money. Well, one thing we do know is that, unlike health, wealth is talked about in the Bible a whole lot. As a matter of fact, at Crown Ministries, they say there's over 2,350 verses that talk about money, wealth, riches, both directly and indirectly in the Scriptures. So the Bible is not silent on this issue at all. And one of the verses that are pretty key in the whole discussion, of course, is from Luke chapter 16 that says, "No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." The Pharisees, who dearly loved their money, heard all this and scoffed at him. They're talking about Jesus. Yeah, and we find in our hearts, it really is kind of difficult. Our money does seem to take us away. We start to feel very self-sufficient. We feel like we're become masters of our fate and captains of our soul, that we become something a little bit more extraordinary because of our money, and that God becomes less and less of an issue to us. Matter of fact, even can become irrelevant to us because we feel like we can take care of ourselves when we have money available. But we know also 1 Timothy tells us to be careful with this. It says, "For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, And some people craving money have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. So there is a darkness to the side of wealth that we have to be careful for. It will have a tendency, if we start to crave it and start to love it more than anything else, it does become evil to us. That it really causes us to become selfish and prideful and all kinds of other things which can pull us away. And there we can probably know people in our lives, maybe we've even experienced it ourselves, this tendency of what wealth and money can do to us. With wealth, we have to understand something really important, is that it is relative. In other words, I may feel like I have a wonderful boat to go out on the ocean with, and all of a sudden, all I got to do is pull up to somebody who's got a bigger boat, and all of a sudden, I feel that my wealth isn't nearly as much as it should be. Matter of fact, we find out that that's how people really relate to wealth more than anything, is how does it relate to other people. We're more interested in having more money than other people than we are just having money enough to take care of our needs and being able to give us the freedom we seek in life. In our current culture, it's the prime measure of social standing, isn't it? We find when people pull up next to us in their car, if they're driving a really nice Mercedes, we have a certain opinion of them, that they are capable, successful people. Then somebody pulls in a beat-up car, we think that they're less than capable, less than successful, and even sometimes even lesser people entirely, which is, of course, very, very problematic conclusion to come to based upon money. But that's the effect of wealth. It is all relative. I use wealth as a relative thing, and I don't feel wealthy unless I'm more wealthy than my neighbor, and I really don't feel poor unless I'm poorer than my neighbor, which is an ironic part of this whole thing. So you can see how much it is a way of leading us into really kind of tearing relationships apart. And there's a great movie that was put out. I say a great movie. A good moral tale of a movie. I wouldn't call it a great movie from the cinematic or even from anything else, but it is a very effective in communicating this very point. It's called The Joneses. Put out about 5 years ago. Maybe want to check that. David Duchovny is the star of that show, that movie, and it really talks about what it really means to have the effect of relative wealth and how it can ruin lives. So take a look at that. It's rated R, so be careful. There's some stuff in it that will make many of us uncomfortable, but some of it's there to help accentuate the problem. The Bible goes on further and tells us that those who love money will never have enough. How meaningless to think that wealth brings true happiness. Ecclesiastes chapter 5. I encourage you to read all the book of Ecclesiastes. There's so much wisdom there. But this is written by a man who actually had all the wealth in the world, Solomon. And he saw the relative wealth issue. Those who love money will never have enough. How meaningless it is to think that wealth can bring true happiness. And I think that really kind of summarizes many things we've already talked about. The big question we need to ask ourselves on the tail end of this is, how do we free ourselves and our culture from the false promises of wealth? This is tough because it's all around us and it's so deep in our culture. We can't even watch any television for any length of time without this assault on our souls, trying to tell us that, boy, all you need is a little more money and life's going to be really good, much better than it is today. And the people that pursue wealth seem to be the ones that seem to get rewarded in our society. And that leads to some very difficult lifestyles, and sometimes it can't be even contained and restrained, and that creates problems for many of us. Here's an interesting question. It deals with our wealth a little bit tangentially, but I actually saw an article by Andrew Carnegie. I mean, not an article, but a write-up about Andrew Carnegie when he talking about his attitude toward, whether we're doing right things by giving money to beggars on the street. And Andrew Carnegie, who is notorious, of course, for giving away a lot of money to charitable causes like the Carnegie Mellon University, and also Carnegie Hall. These are things that Andrew Carnegie donated in order to be able to give back to his give back to society, which he was a big believer in. But he thought that the people who are begging on the street, that's a whole different story, and we should be careful not to just give money to these people because we're doing some really profoundly evil things. He says. First of all, we're actually encouraging them to stay unproductive in their lives. Secondly, is that money that you gave to them could have been put to more productive means. And thirdly, is that we're really training them to actually think that this is a acceptable and place in life to be able to exist as just being a beggar on the street and not really striving to come in and do something much better and more grand with their lives. But then we have verses like this that says, if someone has enough money to live well and sees a brother or sister in need but shows no compassion, how can God's love be in that person? 1 John 3:17, which is a profound thought. And this is the war that we have in our hearts. And I think it's really important that we actually grapple with this a little bit. And I'm not going to be able to give you a definitive answer on this. I see Andrew Carnegie's point is that maybe we are encouraging them to live a life of poverty and panhandling when we do these things. But also, I really legitimately want to help people when they are hurting. So I think it's still going to be a case-by-case determination of whether I'm really doing some real good here or am I doing some harm by giving people money on the street. I know that many of us who live in large cities find ourselves running into this with more regularity than we probably would like, but it's important that we at least have dealt with this in our own hearts. And I know I feel guilty a lot when I pass by somebody who's begging for money and wonder if I'm doing the right thing by not stepping in. But it should also give us also an encouragement to find ways of reaching out to people who truly can be met, who are in need. This is why I find it more helpful to give it to people and organizations that have a real pulse on the community, so they can actually be a lot more judicious in helping people. So, just thoughts to think about, but it also has to do with wealth and make sure that we're not being too stingy, too tight with our money. Because that actually goes to another verse in 1 Timothy that tells us this. Teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. There's a lot of great stuff to unpack in this verse, but one thing that we should not be so proud and trusting of our money, because it can just slip away. And that God really does give us all we need for our enjoyment. This is something important for us to realize, is that He did not put us here just to be a foot soldier and living a Spartan life here on this earth. He does want us to enjoy life, but use money for good. In other words, be rich and generous to people who are in need. Be ready to share with others. That's some fantastic, I think, centering thoughts out of 1 Timothy that would help us a lot. Another question that we have to struggle with is, how much should I give today and how much should I save for retirement? We see there's a real struggle here, and there's a lot of pressure on us to spend time, spend some money, to squirrel money away for retirement. But this is where you got to judge your own heart, how much you're doing just because you think that it's most important for you to take care of yourself than to look into the needs of others. And I've seen a lot of people who struggle with this, and even to the point of actually just really not making themselves available to help others because they're constantly trying to squirrel away money for their retirement. So there's a balance here that we have to understand and look into, is that we do want to be made available to the needs that are in front of us. And Matthew 6 reminds us of how important this is. Don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. And I think this is a constant check that we have to do as Christians, is that Am I saving because I'm just afraid and just don't want to be generous? Or do I want to really throw myself into the fray and try to really help others, knowing that God's going to take care of us? Which, if I read all of Matthew chapter 6, I find out that God will take care of us, even much more so than the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, he says. And we know that where we do put our money, our hearts will go towards. So if we're really constantly thinking about storing away money and accumulating wealth, we can actually hurt our own souls. So I can't give you an exact percentage, or if that's what you're looking for, because I don't have it. But some people, put a certain amount of money toward retirement, no matter what, and then make the rest of it available. Some of the more noble names in history have been very generous with their money. C.S. Lewis gave away most of his income. He didn't keep very much for himself. There are a lot of people out there that were that way. Once they reached a point where they felt like, this is my subsistence, and this is enough for me. The rest of it, I don't think it's going to be necessary for me, and they pass it on and give it away. And it's really remarkable to see those people and those who do those kinds of things. You may have heard of the research that's been done recently, and I think it's got some important considerations for us to take seriously. Is in the happiness literature, where people are saying, how do we really live happy lives? Is that there's a threshold of money in American culture that once you get above it, we really don't see any kind of real big pushes of extra happiness that you get. The last number I heard, I know I've heard other numbers, is around $60,000, that the average household, if they make $60,000 or more, the relative level of happiness from $60,000 in annual income all the way up to $600,000 or $6 million or $60 million, we do not see much of an increase in happiness between those kinds of people. But once you get underneath that amount of money, then money becomes problematic, because sometimes you can't fix your car when it breaks down, or you can't send your kids to college. Those kinds of stresses really start to affect a family. And so underneath that number, we see where actually happiness does actually get affected negatively, while people who don't make that kind of money, which is interesting. So keep that in the back of your mind as you think about what you really need to be happy. And you'll never have enough. Every person that you ask, if they want to have the same amount of money they have now or more money, we all say we want more money. We think it'll lead us to more happiness. But rarely is that the case for many of us. So anyhow, it's worth thinking and praying about, but that's an important consideration for us as Christians. When is the pursuit of wealth in conflict with our chief end? Well, it's when we become selfish and withdrawn from people because of our wealth. When wealth actually becomes a selfish endeavor for us, and we find our souls pinched, and we become opulent, and we become self-serving, and we become less feeling towards others. And that does happen to a lot of people who do become very wealthy, is that they start to see other people as lesser beings than even themselves, which is not a position that the chief end of man allows us to take. We are there to glorify God and enjoy Him forever, and part of that glorifying Him is bringing Him glory and being able to show the world a very loving and caring God. And we find out that our wealth can actually run us away, and our souls can get pinched by this, and we become very selfish and that kind of thing. It can also be conflicting with our chief end. We start actually pigeonholing people with money as being selfish, and we treat them with a little bit of disdain and contempt. And that can be where wealth, that actually is a showing that wealth has become too important in our lives. We start viewing people that way. Some people who have more material goods than you may not be as selfish as it may seem, because they have so much. They may be giving a ton of money away. Just think of like Bill and Melinda Gates and those kinds of people. Give a lot of money away, but they still have a very nice house. So we have to be careful that we're not just doing a blanket statement on this. Poverty is not necessarily a godly thing. When is it in support of our chief end? Is when we actually can accumulate wealth to help others, and to do things that are really good and strong and wonderful for others and be able to really love on the people that God loves. That brings him joy, brings us joy, and it glorifies him, which is all a part of our chief end. And wealth can be a strategic tool in our hands. Uh, Wealth never actually makes us happy in and of itself. It's always an instrumental form of happiness. In other words, it makes us, gives us the power to do things that are really important. And if we use our wealth that way, we'll find our hearts will be very rich for that. So I hope this has been helpful as well. The discussion on wealth, you see these two being such a critical part of the American culture. It's hard not to talk about them in tandem, but they also have the same kind of tendency to draw us away and make us more selfish people if we're not careful. But they also can be wonderful tools in our hands to be able to reach out and love on other people, which is what God would take great joy in. And so, that's being said, I hope this has been helpful to you. It's been a very big help to me just having a chance to grapple with these ideas. Our next conversation is going to be about politics, and being a year of 2017, March of 2017, we're going to find this to be a very important conversation. We're going to talk about how politics and entertainment affect our chief end, and how our chief end helps us understand and modulate politics in our lives, and what does it mean for us to be involved in politics and those kinds of things. So I think it'll be a wonderful conversation. I just think about the irony of talking about the two things you shouldn't talk about in polite company is politics and religion. Here is I'm not only just going to talk about both of them, I'm going to intertwine them and see what they do to each other. So politics and religion will be our conversation along with entertainment next week. Hope you'll be able to be available for it, and I think it's going to be a great conversation. Thank you.